Imagine yourself nestled in a cozy corner, the soft glow of a lantern casting gentle shadows as the world outside fades into a distant murmur. The story of America is one of resilience, change, and quiet triumphs, a tapestry woven with the threads of countless lives. Over the next half hour, we'll explore this story in 4 parts, each a chapter in the nation's unfolding narrative. We begin with the colonial era, stepping into the world of Jamestown, the first permanent English settlement. From there, we'll drift through the Revolutionary War, the early Republic, and the struggles of expansion and civil conflict. We'll trace the nation's growth through the Gilded Age, the tumult of the 20th century, and into the present day. Each segment will carry you gently forward, like a river flowing steadily through time. So settle into your favorite place, let your thoughts soften, and allow the rhythm of history to guide you. Let's begin. Welcome to Boring History for Sleep, where we invite you to wander gently through the quiet paths of America's past, each story crafted to ease you into a state of calm and perhaps a restful slumber. Tonight, we embark on an expansive journey through the history of the United States, from its earliest settlements to the complexities of the modern era. Imagine a fragile settlement on the edge of a vast wilderness where nearly all its settlers faced starvation and disease, yet somehow survived to lay the foundation for a new nation. This is the story of Jamestown, the first permanent English colony in America, established in 1607, where resilience triumphed against all odds. Picture yourself aboard a creaking wooden ship, the air heavy with the scent of salt and tar, as you sail across the vast Atlantic in the spring of 1607. The horizon stretches endlessly before you, a promise of a new world waiting to be claimed. This is the journey of the first English settlers, 104 men and boys, sent by the Virginia Company of London to establish a foothold in what they called Virginia, named for their virgin queen, Elizabeth II. On May 14, 1607, they reached a narrow peninsula along the James River, some 40 miles inland from the Chesapeake Bay. They named their settlement Jamestown in honor of King James I, whose charter had granted them this land. The site seemed ideal for defense, surrounded on 3 sides by water, shielding them from Spanish ships or other threats. Yet, the land was low and swampy, the air thick with the hum of mosquitoes and the faint tang of brackish water. The settlers, many of them gentlemen unused to labor, faced immediate challenges. Their supplies were meager, and the swampy ground offered little fresh water. Disease crept through the camp, carried by the humid air, as dysentery and malaria claimed lives. By the end of that first year, only 38 of the original settlers remained, their numbers dwindled by hardship and illness. The local Powhatan Confederacy, led by Chief Powhatan, watched these newcomers with cautious eyes. At first, trade sustained the colony, as the English exchanged tools and trinkets for corn and fish. The Powhatan's villages, with their bark-covered homes and fields of maize, stood in contrast to the crude wooden fort the settlers built, its walls weathered by the relentless Virginia sun. Among the settlers was Captain John Smith, a soldier and adventurer whose leadership would prove vital. Imagine him standing at the edge of the fort, his boots sinking into the muddy earth as he negotiated with Powhatan messengers. Smith's rule was firm: he who does not work shall not eat. Under his guidance, the settlers fortified their defenses, planted crops, and deepened their trade with the Powhatans. Yet tensions simmered, and clashes over land and resources grew frequent. In the fall of 1609, Smith was injured and returned to England, leaving the colony vulnerable. The winter that followed, known as the Starving Time, was a period of profound struggle. Food ran scarce, and the settlers, desperate, turned to eating leather, rats, and, in the darkest moments, resorted to acts of survival that history records with a heavy heart. By spring 1610, only 60 of the 500 settlers who had arrived remained alive, their faces gaunt, their spirits worn. Just as hope seemed lost, a resupply fleet arrived, carrying provisions and new settlers. The new governor, Lord de la Warr, brought order, his commands echoing through the fort as the colony began to rebuild. The air, once heavy with despair, now carried the faint scent of fresh-cut timber and hope. In 1612, a settler named John Rolfe introduced a strain of tobacco from the West Indies, its leaves soft and fragrant. This crop would transform Jamestown, turning the muddy settlement into a hub of commerce. The fields, once barren, now bloomed with rows of green, their leaves rustling in the breeze as ships carried tobacco back to England, filling the colony's coffers. In 1619, two events shaped Jamestown's legacy. First, the Virginia Company granted settlers the right to form a legislative assembly, the House of Burgesses, which met in a simple wooden church, its benches creaking under the weight of deliberation. This was the first step towards self-governance in the New World, a quiet moment that echoed through history. Second, a Dutch ship arrived, carrying the first Africans to the colony. These men and women, likely indentured servants, marked the beginning of a system that would grow into slavery, a practice that would cast a long shadow over the nation's future. Their arrival was a turning point, their labor shaping the fields and fortunes of Virginia. Conflicts with the Powhatans persisted. In 1622, a coordinated attack by the Powhatans struck the colony, leaving hundreds dead. The settlers rebuilt, but the scars of that conflict lingered, like the charred remains of homes scattered across the landscape. In 1624, King James I dissolved the Virginia Company, and Jamestown became a royal colony, its governance now under the Crown's steady hand. Jamestown remained Virginia's capital until 1699, when the seat of government moved to Williamsburg. By the mid-18th century, the settlement had faded, its wooden structures reclaimed by the earth, its story preserved in the soil. Today, archaeologists at historic Jamestown uncover artifacts, bits of pottery, tools and bones that whisper of those early years, while the Jamestown Settlement Museum recreates the fort and Powhatan villages, inviting visitors to step into the past. As we leave Jamestown behind, let the rhythm of those early days linger, the creak of wooden pragmatic play, wooden ships, the rustle of tobacco leaves, the quiet hope of a new beginning. We'll soon drift into the next chapter, where the colonies grow and the seeds of revolution take root. But for now, let the gentle cadence of history guide you toward rest. As the muddy banks of Jamestown fade into the distance, let us set sail once more, this time aboard the Mayflower, a ship carrying a group of settlers with dreams of a new life rooted in faith. Picture yourself on a crisp September morning in 1620, standing on the deck of this sturdy vessel as it departs from Plymouth, England. The air is heavy with the salty tang of the sea, the faint cries of seagulls blending with the creak of wooden planks swaying gently with the rhythm of the waves. The ship carries 102 passengers and crew toward an uncertain future in the New World, their hopes as vast as the ocean before them. These travelers, later known as the Pilgrims, were English separatists, men and women seeking freedom to practice their faith away from the Church of England's constraints. Having lived in the Netherlands for over a decade, they now sought a permanent home where their beliefs could take root. Imagine their quiet determination, their faces etched with resolve as they stood together on the deck, the wind carrying the scent of damp wool and tar. Among them were families like the Bradfords and Brewsters, their names destined to echo through the story of Plymouth Colony. The journey stretched across 66 days, a slow passage over a restless sea. Below deck, the air was thick with the mingled scents of salt, sweat, and unwashed cloth. Seasickness weighed heavily on many, yet small moments of hope persisted. Elizabeth Hopkins gave birth to a son named Oceanus, his cries a soft counterpoint to the ship's timbers groaning in the wind. Only one life was lost, a sailor taken by illness, his passing mourned quietly in the stillness of the night. On November 11th, 1620, the Mayflower anchored at Provincetown Harbour, Cape Cod, its sails furled against a sky heavy with grey clouds. The Pilgrims had aimed for the Hudson River within the Virginia Company's charter, but storms had driven them north, leaving them without legal authority to settle. In the dim light of the ship's cabin, where the air was warm with the scent of wax and ink, 41 men gathered to sign the Mayflower Compact. This simple document, etched onto parchment with careful strokes, bound them to form a government based on the will of the majority, a quiet vow of unity and order. After weeks of exploration, they chose a site on the western side of Cape Cod Bay, naming it Plymouth after their port of departure. The land, once a Wampanoag village now silent due to disease, offered a deep harbour and a clear stream. The air was sharp with the scent of pine and damp earth, a new world unfolding before them. They began to build, their hammers tapping softly in the winter chill, crafting shelters of wood and thatch against the cold. That first winter was a time of profound hardship. The cold bit at their fingers, and illness swept through the settlement, carried by the damp, unyielding wind. Scurvy and pneumonia weakened their bodies, and by spring only 52 of the original 102 remained. The loss was heavy. Yet the survivors pressed on, their faith a steady anchor. Picture their quiet prayers, the faint glow of firelight casting shadows on weary faces as they held fast to hope. In March 1621, a Wampanoag man named Samoset stepped into the settlement, his voice carrying the unfamiliar cadence of English learned from fishermen. He introduced them to Tisquantum, known as Squanto, a man whose own journey had carried him across the ocean and back. Squanto taught the Pilgrims to plant corn, their hands sinking into the cool, loamy soil, and showed them where to fish and hunt. His guidance was a lifeline, a bridge between two worlds, woven through the rhythm of shared labor. Through Squanto, the Pilgrims met Usamekin, the Wampanoag chief known as Massasoit, whose treaty of peace ensured the colony's survival. Imagine their meeting, the air filled with the scent of wood smoke and the soft rustle of leaves as words of friendship were exchanged. In the fall of 1621, the Pilgrims celebrated their first harvest with a feast, joined by the Wampanoag. Tables set beneath the open sky held roasted venison, corn, and bread, their warmth a quiet testament to survival and gratitude. This gathering, later called the First Thanksgiving, was a moment of harmony, its memory woven into the gentle cadence of history. Plymouth Colony grew slowly, its population reaching about 160 by 1627. The Mayflower Compact remained the cornerstone of their governance, a simple agreement that shaped their community's steady rhythm. The Pilgrim story, though marked by loss, is one of quiet endurance, a thread in the tapestry of a nation yet to be born. As we leave the shores of Plymouth, let the soft echo of their footsteps linger, carrying us forward to the next chapter, where the colonies expand and new ideas begin to stir, like whispers on the wind. As the gentle rhythm of colonial life carries us forward, we find ourselves in the 1760s, a time when the air in the colonies began to hum with a new tension, like the distant rumble of a gathering storm. Picture a bustling colonial town, its streets paved with cobblestones, the air thick with the scent of freshly baked bread and the faint tang of salt water from the nearby harbour. The colonies, now home to over 2 million souls by 1770, had grown into a patchwork of thriving communities, from the rocky farms of New England to the sprawling plantations of the South. But beneath this surface of growth, a quiet unease was taking root, a restlessness that would soon reshape the course of history. The seeds of this unrest were sown in the aftermath of the French and Indian War, a conflict that stretched from 1754 to 1763. The war, part of a larger struggle between Britain and France, had secured British dominance in North America, but it came at a steep cost. Imagine the war's end in the colonies, the air filled with the scent of gunpowder and the distant echo of cannon fire as British soldiers returned to their garrisons. The victory had doubled Britain's national debt, and the Crown turned to the colonies to share the burden. In 1763, the Proclamation Line was drawn, forbidding settlers from moving west of the Appalachian Mountains, a decision that rankled colonists eager for new land. The air in frontier taverns was thick with the murmur of discontent, as farmers and speculators gathered over mugs of ale, their voices low with frustration. To raise revenue, Britain imposed a series of taxes, beginning with the Sugar Act of 1764. This law taxed molasses, a staple in the triangular trade, and aimed to curb smuggling. In ports like Boston and New York, merchants gathered in candlelit rooms, the air warm with the scent of wax and ink, as they pored over ledgers and grumbled about the new duties. The Sugar Act was followed by the Stamp Act in 1765, a tax on all printed materials, newspapers, legal documents, even playing cards. Picture a colonial printer, his hands stained with ink as he sets type for a pamphlet decrying the tax, the air in his shop heavy with the scent of paper and metal. The Stamp Act sparked widespread outrage, uniting colonists under the cry of "No taxation without representation," a phrase whispered in town meetings and shouted in the streets. Colonial resistance took shape through groups like the Sons of Liberty, formed in 1765. Imagine their gatherings in Boston, the air filled with the scent of pine and wood smoke, as men like Samuel Adams and John Hancock met in secret, their voices steady with resolve. They organized protests, their footsteps echoing on cobblestone streets, and occasionally turned to acts of defiance, such as burning effigies of tax collectors under the moonlit sky. The Stamp Act Congress, a meeting of 9 colonies in New York in 1765, drafted a petition to the king, their quills scratching on parchment, in a room where the air carried the faint scent of wax seals. Britain repealed the Stamp Act in 1766, but the Declaratory Act followed, asserting Parliament's authority over the colonies, a quiet assertion that lingered like a shadow. The Townshend Acts of 1767 brought new taxes on goods like glass, lead, paper and tea, further stoking colonial anger. In response, colonists organized boycotts, their resolve as steady as the rhythm of a spinning wheel. Women, known as the Daughters of Liberty, gathered in parlors across the colonies, the air filled with the scent of lye and wool as they spun cloth to replace British imports. In Boston, tensions boiled over on March 5, 1770, in an event later called the Boston Massacre. Picture the scene. A snowy evening, the air sharp with the scent of frost, as a crowd of colonists taunted British soldiers near the custom house. The soldiers, their red coats stark against the white snow, fired into the crowd, leaving 5 dead. The air filled with the echo of shouts and the toll of church bells as news of the event spread, fueling colonial outrage. Britain repealed most of the Townshend Acts in 1770, but the tax on tea remained, a lingering reminder of Parliament's control. In 1773, the Tea Act granted the East India Company a monopoly on tea sales, undercutting colonial merchants. On December 16, 1773, the Sons of Liberty staged the Boston Tea Party, a quiet act of defiance under a moonlit sky. Imagine the harbor that night, the air heavy with the scent of salt water and tea, as colonists disguised as Mohawk warriors boarded 3 ships, the Dartmouth, the Eleanor, and the Beaver. They dumped 342 chests of tea into the harbor, the water rippling softly with the weight of their protest, a moment that echoed through the colonies like a whisper of rebellion. Britain's response was swift and severe. In 1774, the Intolerable Acts were passed, closing Boston Harbor until the tea was paid for and placing Massachusetts under military rule. Imagine the harbour, once bustling with ships, now silent, the air heavy with the scent of salt and despair as fishermen and merchants stood on the docks, their livelihoods paused. The Quartering Act forced colonists to house British troops, their homes filled with the scent of gunpowder and the clatter of boots on wooden floors. Across the colonies, committees of correspondence formed, their letters carried on horseback through moonlit nights, the air filled with the scent of leather and dust as they united in opposition. In September 1774, the First Continental Congress convened in Philadelphia, a gathering of 56 delegates from 12 colonies. Georgia sent none, its governor loyal to the crown. Picture Carpenter's Hall, the air warm with the scent of polished wood and ink, as men like George Washington, Patrick Henry, and John Adams debated their course. They drafted a petition to King George III, their voices steady in the candlelit room, demanding the repeal of the intolerable acts and asserting their rights as Englishmen. The Congress also called for a boycott of British goods, a quiet act of resistance that spread through the colonies, from the cobblestone streets of Charleston to the muddy paths of rural Virginia. As 1775 dawned, the colonies stood on the brink of war. Militias trained in town squares, their drills a steady rhythm under the spring sun, the air filled with the scent of fresh grass and gunpowder. In Massachusetts, the air was thick with tension, as British troops under General Thomas Gage prepared to seize colonial arms. On April 18, 1775, Paul Revere and William Dawes rode through the night, their horses' hooves pounding on dirt roads, the air carrying the scent of dew and earth as they warned of British movements. The next day, April 19, 1775, the first shots were fired at Lexington and Concord, a moment that would mark the beginning of the Revolutionary War, its echo a quiet drumbeat in the distance. But let us pause here on the eve of revolution and reflect on the colonies as they stood on this precipice. Imagine a quiet evening in 1775, the air cool with the scent of spring blossoms, as a colonial family gathers in their home, the fire casting a soft glow on their faces. Outside, the sky is a tapestry of stars, and the distant toll of a church bell marks the hour. The world feels vast and uncertain, yet there is a quiet hope in their hearts, a hope for liberty, for a future they cannot yet see. As the fire crackles softly, let this moment linger, a gentle reminder of the courage it took to dream of freedom. Now, as the stars shine above, let your thoughts soften, your breath slow, and allow the gentle cadence of history to guide you toward a peaceful slumber, knowing that the story of America's birth will wait for you when you wake. As the shores of Plymouth fade into the gentle haze of memory, let us wander further along the Atlantic coast, where the American colonies began to weave a tapestry of communities, each thread vibrant with its own purpose and promise. Picture a quiet morning in the early 18th century, the air soft with the scent of pine and sea salt as ships glide into bustling ports and farmers till the fertile earth. From the rocky cliffs of New England to the sun-drenched fields of the Carolinas, the colonies grew, their numbers swelling, and their identities taking shape, forming the foundation of a nation yet to be born. The story begins with the first settlements we visited, Jamestown in 1607, where tobacco fields bloomed under the Virginia sun, and Plymouth in 1620, where pilgrims sought a haven for their faith. These were but the seeds of a larger garden. By 1732, 13 colonies stood along the eastern seaboard: New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. Each was born of distinct dreams, some for profit, others for freedom, and all shaped by the land and its people. American colonies. Massachusetts Bay, founded in 1630 by Puritans, was a beacon of religious zeal, its towns centered around meeting houses where the air was thick with the scent of polished wood and candle wax. Connecticut, established in 1636 by Puritans seeking new lands, crafted the Fundamental Orders, a document that whispered of self-governance. Rhode Island, also founded in 1636 by Roger Williams, offered refuge for those persecuted for their beliefs. Its harbors alive with the creak of ships and the murmur of diverse voices. New Hampshire, emerging in 1638, grew from fishing and trade, its rocky shores echoing with the calls of gulls. The middle colonies brought their own flavor. New York, originally New Netherland, was claimed by the English in 1664, its streets bustling with Dutch and English merchants trading furs and grain. New Jersey, granted in 1664, and Pennsylvania, founded in 1681 by William Penn as a Quaker haven, welcomed settlers from across Europe, their markets filled with the scent of fresh bread and spices. Delaware, initially part of Pennsylvania, became a separate colony in 1704, its small farms dotting the landscape. Maryland, established in 1634 as a Catholic refuge, and the Carolinas, chartered in 1663 and later split, thrived on agriculture, their fields heavy with tobacco and rice. Georgia, the last to join in 1732, was a buffer against Spanish Florida, its settlers planting roots in the red clay soil, 13 colonies. The population of these colonies grew steadily, like a river swelling with spring rains. In 1700, about 250,000 souls called the colonies home, a number that soared to nearly 2.5 million by 1775. This growth was fueled by high birth rates and waves of immigration. English, Scots-Irish, Scottish, Welsh, German, Dutch, and French Huguenots crossed the Atlantic, their ships heavy with hope and the scent of tar. By 1776, 85% of the white population traced their roots to the British Isles, with 9% German, 4% Dutch, and others adding to the mosaic. Yet this growth was not solely European. Enslaved Africans, forcibly brought to the colonies, numbered in the hundreds of thousands by the mid-18th century, their labor shaping the fields of Virginia, South Carolina, and beyond, 13 colonies. The economy was as varied as the people. In New England, the rocky soil yielded modest harvests, but the sea offered bounty. Fishermen hauled cod from the Atlantic, their nets glistening with salt water, while shipbuilders crafted vessels that carried goods to England and the West Indies. The middle colonies, with fertile lands, grew wheat and corn, their mills humming softly in the morning mist. The southern colonies thrived on cash crops, tobacco in Virginia and Maryland, rice and indigo in South Carolina. These plantations relied heavily on enslaved labor, a system that cast a long shadow over the colony's prosperity. The air in these fields was heavy with the scent of earth and toil, a reminder of the human cost woven into the economy, the growth of the colonies. Culturally, the colonies were a tapestry of traditions. English settlers brought ballads and folk tales, their voices mingling in taverns where the firelight flickered. German immigrants introduced sturdy log cabins, their craftsmanship evident in the neat rows of homes. African rhythms and stories carried across the ocean, blended with European hymns, creating a unique sound in the colony's churches and gatherings. Native American influences lingered in the names of rivers and towns, and in the knowledge of crops like corn and squash, shared in moments of uneasy peace. The Iroquois Confederacy, a powerful alliance in the north, negotiated with colonists, their council fires burning under starlit skies, while southern tribes like the Cherokee faced growing pressure on their lands, Native American colonization. Education flourished, nurturing the seeds of new ideas. Harvard College, founded in 1636, trained ministers in Cambridge, its halls echoing with Latin and Greek. Yale, established in 1701, and the College of William and Mary, founded in 1693, joined the effort, their libraries filled with the scent of leather-bound books. These institutions, though small, were beacons of learning where young men debated philosophy and science, their quills scratching in the quiet of candlelit rooms. Schools in towns taught reading and writing, ensuring that even farmers' children could read the Bible or a merchant's ledger, education in the Age of Enlightenment. The Enlightenment, a wave of thought from Europe, swept through the colonies, its ideas as gentle yet persistent as a summer breeze. John Locke's writings on natural rights, life, liberty, and property resonated with colonists who began to question the divine right of kings. Montesquieu's ideas on the separation of powers and Voltaire's calls for reason stirred debates in coffeehouses, where the air was rich with the scent of roasted beans and ink. Benjamin Franklin, a printer and polymath, embodied this spirit, his press in Philadelphia churning out pamphlets that spread Enlightenment ideals. The colony's printing presses, creaking under the weight of new ideas, made books and newspapers accessible, fostering a shared intellectual culture, American Enlightenment. The Great Awakening, a series of religious revivals in the 1730s and 1740s, added a spiritual dimension to this intellectual ferment. Preachers like Jonathan Edwards, with his sermon "Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God," stirred hearts in Northampton, Massachusetts, his voice echoing through crowded meeting houses. George Whitefield, an itinerant preacher, drew thousands to open fields. His words carried on the wind, urging personal salvation and emotional faith. These revivals, with their fervent gatherings under starlit skies, challenged established churches and fostered a sense of unity across colonies, as Baptists, Methodists, and Presbyterians joined the chorus of renewal, enlightenment, and revolution. Politically, the colonies developed systems of self-governance that set them apart. Each had a governor, some appointed by the crown, others by proprietors, but the real power often lay in representative assemblies. These bodies, like Virginia's House of Burgesses or Massachusetts' General Court, met in modest halls, their debates filled with the rustle of papers and the murmur of voices. The Fundamental Orders of Connecticut, drafted in 1639, were an early blueprint for democratic governance, while Pennsylvania's Frame of Government, penned by William Penn, emphasized liberty and fairness. These assemblies, though limited by British oversight, gave colonists a voice, their deliberations a quiet rehearsal for greater independence, American Enlightenment thought. Yet, as the colonies grew, so did tensions with Britain. The French and Indian War, fought from 1754 to 1763, drained British coffers and strained colonial relations. The war, pitting Britain and its colonies against France and its native allies, ended with British victory, but left a legacy of debt. The proclamation of 1763, barring settlement west of the Appalachians, frustrated colonists eager for new lands, their dreams of expansion checked by royal decree. The Stamp Act of 1765, taxing printed materials, sparked outrage, with colonists gathering in taverns and town squares, their voices rising in protest against taxation without representation. The Albany Plan of Union, proposed by Benjamin Franklin in 1754, had called for colonial unity, but its rejection showed the challenges of cooperation. These early conflicts, like embers in a quiet fire, hinted at the revolution to come, Age of Enlightenment. In this era of growth, the colonies were not just expanding in size, but forging a new identity. The Enlightenment's call for reason and rights, the Great Awakening's fervor, and the political experiments in self-governance wove together a people ready to question authority. The air was alive with possibility, from the clatter of printing presses to the hymns sung in revival tents. As we drift toward the next chapter, where these tensions ignite into revolution, let the quiet hum of progress and the whisper of new ideas carry you gently forward.